Friends, today I wish to take up the subject matter international relations and the idea and its perception from ancient times till date. The history of international relations spans from ancient civilizations where city states and empires navigated complex diplomacy to the modern era of global governance, multilateral organizations, and international law. I wish to state here a broad overview organized by key periods and transitions. Let us start with ancient civilizations 3000 BCE to 500 CE. One of the earliest forms of diplomacy was between the city states in Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. The Treaty of Kadesh 1274 BCE between the Egyptians and the Hittites is one of the earliest known peace treaties. Greece and Rome. Greek city states known as polis interacted through diplomacy, alliances, and warfare. The Delian League and Peloponnesian Leagues were earlier examples of alliances. The Roman Empire expanded through military conquest but also engaged in diplomacy, including alliances and treaties with various tribes and nations. The China's Warring States period and Qing unification was 475 to 221 BCE. The Chinese states adopted strategies to either make alliances or weaken their rivals, culminating in the unification of China under the Qing dynasty. During the Middle and early modern periods 500 to 1800 CE, Islamic empires such as the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates interacted with Byzantines and European kingdoms, as well as with Indian and East Asian civilizations. Trade routes, including the Silk Route, facilitated both commerce and cultural exchange. The Mongol Empire, 1206 1386 BCE, under leaders like Genghis Khan, formed the largest contiguous empire in history, promoting trade and diplomatic ties across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The Peace of Westphalia ended the 30 Years' War and established the principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity, laying the foundation for modern international relations. Now, this system, based on the equality of states, influenced European diplomacy for centuries. And this Westphalian system and this treaty was in the year 1648. We find now the age of empires and colonialism between 1500 to 1800. Now, the colonial expansion in European powers like Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Netherlands expanded their empires, often clashing in colonial conflicts. European dominance led to the exploitation and reshaping of societies in Africa, Asia, and America. European states developed a balanced of power system to prevent any single country from dominating the continent. Now, this period saw the rise of modern diplomacy, with permanent embassies and ambassadors becoming more common. During 19th century, we find nationalism, imperialism, and Congress of Vienna 1850 to 1914 period. The Congress of Vienna 1814 to 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, European powers met to restore order, redrawing boundaries and establishing a concert of Europe system to maintain peace and balance of power. Nationalistic movements led to the unification of Germany and Italy, while European powers expanded their empires in Africa and Asia, leading to tensions among them. We also find during this period, 1850 to 1940, the system of alliances. Alliances like the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente, France, Russia, as United Kingdom, began to define European international relations, setting the stage for World War I. Now, during the 20th century, we find the World Wars, Cold War, and the global organizations, how they affected the international relations. World War One, 1940 to 1918. Thus, this war transformed the global power structures and led to the Treaty of Versailles. The League of Nations was established to prevent future conflicts, though it ultimately failed to prevent World War II. World War II, 1939 to 1945, resulted in massive shifts in global power, with the United States and the Soviet Union emerging as superpowers. United Nations and the Bretton Woods system, we call it, in the year 1945. The United Nations was established to promote peace and cooperation, and the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF and World Bank, and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, later the WTO, aim to stabilize the global economy. We find the Cold War between 1947 to 1991. The US and the Soviet Union engaged in a nuclear arms race, ideological rivalry, and proxy wars. Key alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact were formed, shaping global alignments. Then we find the decolonization and the non-alignment movement post World War II. Decolonization led many African, Asian, and Latin American nations to seek independence, and some formed the non-alignment movement to avoid Cold War alignments. Now, let us see the post-Cold War and the rise of globalization, 1991 to the present day. Now we find the end of the Cold War and unipolarity, 1991. The collapse of the Soviet Union left the US as a primary global power. International relations shifted towards cooperation in areas like arms control and economic integration. We find the rise of globalization at the same time. Global trade, multinational corporations, and technology have interconnected the world more than ever. Economic institutions like the WTO grew, and free trade agreements became widespread. We also find the emergence of new power structures or centers. China's economic rise and Russia's resurgence have introduced a new multipolar world. Regional powers like India, Brazil, and South Africa have also grown more influential. The international issues such as global challenges like climate change, terrorism, pandemics, and cybersecurity have led to greater international cooperation, but also exposed gaps in global governance. We find multipolarity and tensions which are at present exist. The US China rivalry, along the Russian assertiveness in Europe, marks a return to great power competition. New alignments, regional groupings, and the role of international institutions continue to shape global politics. So, in this way, the historical evolution shows how international relations have shifted from empires and treaties to global governance and complex interdependencies in a multipolar world. Today's global system, characterized by complex challenges that transcend borders, underscores the need for cooperative and adaptive international relations. Now, after stating all this at the global level, generally, now let us see India's international relations, how it was perceived and existed from ancient times. At the outset, it may be stated that India's international relations have evolved significantly from ancient times to the modern era, influenced and shaped by its geographical position, cultural diversity, and economic aspirations. Let's have its overview now. In the ancient period, say during the Indus Valley Civilization, C2 500 to 1900 BCE, trade relations with Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Persia, while land and sea routes existed, exchanged goods like cotton, spices, and jewelry, fostering early globalization. During Vedic period, c. 1500 to 600 BCE, limited external interactions, but Aryans migrated into India, influencing culture. Now, formation of small kingdoms with little external diplomacy. Let's see a very important period, Mauryan period, 321 to 185 BCE. Emperor Ashoka established diplomatic ties with Hellenistic kingdoms, Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. Spread of Buddhism to regions like China, Sri Lanka, and Central Asia through emissaries. Now maintained a well documented relationship with Greek rulers like Seleucus I during the Gupta period 320 to 550 CE. It is known as the Golden Age of India, fostering cultural and economic exchanges. And at the same time, we find that the it flourished during this period. They flourished in trade with Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and the Roman Empire. The spread of Hinduism and Buddhism through cultural and religious missions or missionaries. South Indian kingdoms like Chola, Pallava, and Chera. The Chola Empire, 9th to 13th century CE, it was engaged in naval expeditions and trade in Southeast Asia, Srivijaya Empire, modern Indonesia, and Malaysia. We find the spread of Islamic or Indian culture, architecture, and language to Southeast Asia. The active trade with Arabs and the Mediterranean. During the medieval period, say Delhi Sultanate 12006 to 1526, interaction we find interaction with Central Asian Empire, Persia, and the Islamic world, and it brought Persian culture, art, and architecture to India. And during this period, flourishing trade through the Silk Road and maritime routes. Let us see during Mughal Empire, the international relations in India, 15262 to 1857. Diplomatic ties with Persia, the Ottoman Empire, and the European trading powers like Portugal, the Dutch, and the British. Now, we find international global trade in global trade of the spices, textiles, and gems, making India a key economic power. Introduction of new technologies, art, and administration from Paris and Europe. During the colonial period, say 1757 to 1947, this dominated by British imperialism, cutting India off from independent international relations. Trade and resources were controlled by Britain for European markets. India independence movement inspired global anti-colonial struggles at the same time. In the independence era, 1947 to the present, we find, say, between 1947 to 1960s, we find the non-alignment movement, we known as NAM. India under Nehru became a founding member of non-alignment movement, maintaining neutrality during the Cold War, advocated for decolonization or cooperation among developing nations, and it established diplomatic ties with both the Soviet Union and the United States. Let us see from 1970s to 1980s regional leadership. Increased focus on Southeast Asia through SAARC, 1985. Strategic partnership with the Soviet Union for military and economic support. And we also find it confronted regional conflicts, including wars with Pakistan, 1947, 1965, 1971, and with China in the year 1962. In 1990s, we find the phase what we call as economic liberalization, initiated under late P.V. Narasimha Rao, Prime Minister of India, opening up to globalization and foreign investment. Now, it strengthened ties with USA, the European Union, and East Asian economies. It focused on look East policy to engage with ASEAN countries at the same time. Now, from the year 2000 onwards, say to the present era, we find the phase what we call as global power aspirations, strategic partnership with major powers like the United States, Russia, Japan, and the European Union by India. Now, leading role we find of India in international organizations like BRICS, G20, and the United Nations. We also find the balancing relations with China through economic ties and strategic rivalry, for example, border disputes, bold and rolled initiatives. And India advocated for a multipolar world order and reforms in global governance. We also find India's role, that's leadership in climate change initiatives such as the International Solar Alliance. What are the key themes now in the India's international relations? We find soft power, promotion of culture, yoga, Bollywood, and democratic ideals, economic diplomacy, trade agreements, energy security, and technology partnerships, regional stability, leadership in South Asia, resolving disputes with Pakistan and fostering connectivity, and global challenges, counterterrorism, climate change, and multilateral cooperation are the major areas or themes of India's international relations. So, as such, we see that India's evolution from an ancient trade hub to a modern global player reflects its enduring influence and adaptability in international relations. Thank you very, very much.